All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our August Luncheon Lab. My name is Reggie Holmes. I am the founder and creative director at Enthuse Creative. Our topic today is brand story. Move, motivate, and mobilize your audience. I'm really glad that you all could be in here. As I mentioned earlier, feel free to put your information in the chat so we can all get to know each other. And I really hope that we have a great time of learning and interacting and just being able to grow in our ability to understand and share brand stories, which are incredibly meaningful, no matter what type of business you're in, no matter what type of customer you serve. It's really important for the work that we do today. So thanks for being here. I wanted to mention the sponsor for our Luncheon Lab this month is actually a one-to-one professional personal brand coaching program called Stand Out and Rise, or SOAR. And SOAR is a program that is designed for individuals who are starting a business and need to create a powerful personal brand in order to be able to leverage that to help grow their business venture. So this is someone that is talented and has an excellent skill set and experience, but they are not necessarily comfortable with putting themselves out there as the face of a business. They've never had to do that before. They feel some reticence in doing that, but they know that that's essential to help them grow their business. And so Stand Out and Rise is the coaching program that's designed to sort of walk them through the process of going from a person with a great idea to a person who can make a great impact and leave a great impression on others as a business owner. So there's a website if you'd like to learn more. They are our sponsor for today's workshop. And our speakers is myself, obviously, Reggie Holmes, and I'm really excited to welcome Gbenga Ogunjimi, who's a social entrepreneur, storyteller, and founder of Go Global. And maybe he'll get into a little bit of how we connected. We met at an event, and sort of through the power of storytelling and social media, we're able to stay in touch and connect on some really cool opportunities of late. And I'm really glad that he could be here today and educate all of us on brand stories and how to tell them in a way that is compelling and makes a difference for our audience. So what are our takeaways today? To illuminate what brand stories are and how they work, to demonstrate why they're effective in helping brands connect to their audiences, and then providing a framework for you to be able to create your own brand story. So these are called Luncheon Labs because the idea is that you actually lab, we do some work together. And I'm really excited that we'll have the opportunity to work with Gbenga to be able to do that today. So in the spirit of our topic, I want to tell a story, which will hopefully set the table and really help us understand the power in what we're talking about today. In 2009, two men, Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn, thought to investigate the idea of stories. They bought 100 cheap trinkets from a thrift store or several thrift stores and asked professional writers to invent a story about each object. For example, a heart-shaped paperweight was accompanied by a tale about an office manager who used it to weigh down the lid of her jar of M&Ms. Walker and Glenn then listed the items on eBay along with their stories to see whether the value of the objects would increase. The results were staggering. From an original outlay of $129, their sales totaled nearly $3,600, a profit of over 2,700%. That experiment, dubbed the Significant Objects Project, demonstrates the power of stories and the emotional value they add, to the extent that they can transform the seemingly mundane into something significant and treasured. People who bought the items were willing to pay more simply because there was a story attached to the objects. And as I was doing research for this Luncheon Lab, trying to think of a great story that would sort of tie this all together and really help set the stage for this discussion that we're going to have. This story really sort of blew me away. And it speaks to the power of stories and really how they can help us to make what we do more attractive, more compelling, um, and ultimately more profitable, right? We are all in business of some kind, and stories are not just, sort of a marketing buzzword. They're really something that, if leveraged the right way, can really help grow our business, grow our practice or nonprofit, whatever it is that we are representing. So thought that was a really great story, and just illustrates how something, like these trinkets that were basically being sold for very little, all of a sudden the value that others perceived in them changed because there was a compelling story attached. So we're going to talk about what is a brand story. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gbenga here to illuminate that idea of what is a brand story. But first, he's going to give a little bit more detailed introduction about himself. So you can go ahead and jump in
Sure.
and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Reggie, once again for the opportunity to be here. As you rightly said, I'm a business storyteller. I'm a social entrepreneur. The name of my business is called Go Global. Go Global is a leadership consulting and media firm. Our goal is to help leaders tell, monetize, and elevate their stories. I have a documentary called Good to Great Stories, a small business documentary. It features 7 entrepreneurs east of the river, Ward 7 and 8 in Washington, D.C., using their own personal story to change the identity of their community and also go toward the realm of profitability in their business. I'm author of the book called Borderless Voice, The Power of Telling Your Story and Defining Your Identity. And I also teach business storytelling and micro-entrepreneurship at UDC, University of District of Columbia. So I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you for thank you for being here. We're excited to have you. And so I know that you wanted to introduce this concept here, so I'll let you do this as well.
Yes, so I want to start with a conversation. We can make it a little bit more interactive. So if I were to offer you once, I'm Nigerian, so I'm not talking about Nigerian dollars, naira, I'm talking about American dollars. If I were to offer you 1 million American dollars today, or ask you to choose the power of your story, which one are you going to choose? If you're going to choose money, just type the $ or money. If you're going to choose story, just type story in the chat box.
Okay, let's see what people say.
Okay. So far we have stories. There should be someone like me who definitely is going to go for the money. So I'm waiting for that person. Is there anyone with me going to say I would go definitely for the money? Okay, so we have stories. So that is interesting. Stories leading so far. I know it's a difficult choice. Most definitely. So what I'm going to do is to share my screen and kind of continue along this line. So,
all right.
You can see my screen, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to look at these 3 leaders in the field on the screen. And I know this choice of a story and money, $1 million is a difficult choice. We all can use $1 million. But the idea is that our story is powerful enough that it has monetary value, like Reggie just explained, and that our story can become a business blueprint for creating financial success and creating opportunities for us. And in our stories are latent defining moments and episodes. And each of those episodes are financially valuable. And my goal in this presentation is to kind of leave you with a framework and a blueprint that you can incorporate into your personal brand, into your business, into your nonprofit, and you can increase the outcomes financially and otherwise for your business. So let's look at the thought leaders on the screen. To my far right, we have Robert Kiyosaki. He's the author of the book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. very successful book. And the book tells the story of a defining moment to him in the city of Hawaii. And he talked about he was going through this curiosity about the value and the power of money. And his school professor, teacher could not help him out. His dad could not help him out. And his mentor, his dad's friend, helped him out. And that journey led to a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That book went on to sell, and it's a signature story. It's a story of his own personal transformation with the subject of money. He went on to become a thought leader within the realm of financial education. And he used those stories to kind of break out his brand identity in the marketplace. That book in itself went on to sell over 40 million copies. And he created corporations. There's the Rich Dad Entertainment, Rich Dad University. There's the Rich Dad Real Estate Corporation. And each of those books, even if you sold them for $1 each, so we're looking at $40 million at least. So if your name was Robert Kiyosaki, would you have chosen $1 million a few years ago? Or would you have seen what your story can actually do for you? We know the story of Oprah in Baltimore, encountering, going through sexism in the workplace, and how she had this moment where she finally decided to step out of that organization, step into her own personal brand, created one of the most iconic brands in the world, the Oprah brand. And we know what the outcome of that was. So if your name was Oprah, would you have chosen $1 million, or would you have seen the power of your story? So let's talk about the president. The president during the pandemic, and it was one of the most challenging time in American history. And the primary for the Democratic Party had about 20 candidates, all qualified. And someone may even question his credibility, his qualification, particularly his suitability for the position, how relevant his idea was. But he told a story of a defining moment at a Walter Reed Hospital with his son, Beau Biden. And it was this idea of My Promise. We know that conversation led to a book called My Promise that did very well. But that story was elevated to a political campaign message. And that kind of realized the presidency of the United States. And when he told that story, and I lost someone during the pandemic, and it really resonated and struck home for me, and not obviously millions of people around the world. So if your name was Biden, would you have chosen money, or would you have chosen your story? So really that is what the idea of storytelling is. And Steve Jobs said the most powerful person in the world is a storyteller, because a storyteller sets the vision, sets the value, and sets the agenda to come. One of the things I talk about storytelling that is not so much of once upon a time, but more compelling storytelling, it has to be forward-looking, it has to be future-oriented, even it has to be aspirational. So I was kind of looking for a very simple definition for a brand story. And the one that kind of most resonate was this one, that a brand story represent who you are and what you stand for. And it tells the tale of a company's origins, values, goals, and mission. This story sets the stage for every interaction the customer would have with your brand in store and online. So this kind of resonate in terms of a definition. So I'm going to turn it over to Reggie. I haven't set the stage of a definition of a brand story.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's have you stop sharing, then I'll share a little bit more. But I think that does a great job of sort of painting the picture of what a brand story is. And so we'll continue with looking a little bit more at branding in general, just to add some more context. So my definition of brand is an entity's communicated, perceived, and understood value. And we say entity because that can be a person, as Gbenga just talked about, or an organization. People have brands too. And I like to say that brands are created by people for people. And so when we think about brands, you have a relationship with brands, and it sort of mirrors your relationship with people. Um, so branding is all about people, and it helps to start there. And then we can also think about branding in terms of organizations too. But branding, I guess, as a noun, but also as a verb, is any effort and activities to express or enhance that value. So we'll use both of those words, but what's really important is to think about how it's communicated, but also how it's perceived by the audience. And we'll talk a lot about audience, but also understood. So not just what you say, but what people see and understand. And I believe that it has four functions. So to identify, to communicate, to connect. And I really want to hit on connection, because that's what I believe that brand story is focused on doing, on helping you connect to your customer through the power of story, which is this universal thing that ties all of us together. No matter your demographic information or where you come from or anything like that, there is power to connect all people through story, which is something that if you've lived life and shared an experience as a person, there are stories that are part of that pretty much anyone can connect with. And lastly, to differentiate. But brand story is really that element of the brand process or brand system that is really focused on using the power of story to create connection that bears results for your business. So what does it mean to be a storyteller in today's marketplace? Just a few ideas along those lines. There was a survey through Sprout Social, which is a social media company, which indicated that company alignment with personal values, so companies aligning with the things that people believe, is 74% more important to consumers this year than it was in 2021. So every year we see people placing more and more of an emphasis in terms of where they spend their money, the brands that they support, with that being with companies that share their values. So when there's alignment there. So obviously sharing your brand story gives people an opportunity to step into the story of how your values came to be at its origin, as your company or as your own identity has progressed over time. And the more that people know that and can understand that through story, they can resonate and relate, and that allows them to have that shared value with you and want to engage with you further. The next is attraction, then action. So not just telling stories or communicating the finer points of the narrative of what happened, but really reaching customers where they are with the insights that matter to them, drawing them in, but also sending them out to take some action. And this is really important if you think about nonprofit organizations or social enterprises and things like that. They want to tell a great story to attract those people that believe in the same things. But there's always a call to action as well. It's not just listen to our story. People understand that, hey, time is valuable and people have a lot going on. So we don't just want to tell you a great story. We want to tell you so that we can inspire you, so that we can incite something within you that you can then go and take the positive action. So there's attraction, then action. If we think about the word emotion, it comes from a Middle French word, which means moving, stirring, agitation, and it really applied to the idea of a social movement. So a group of people getting together to, again, take some kind of action. Emotion in our day and age has come to mean simply feelings or feelings, but it had this idea of movement, and so when we talk about brand stories, they are using emotion, using feelings, but feelings to create movement, whether that's to go, stand against something that is wrong or to stand up for something that is right. And we see companies and individuals really using that to get their audience to be inspired to take positive action as they see fit. And then lastly, as I kind of alluded to already, relationship building. So brand storytelling is about relationship, not just transaction, right? There are all sorts of marketing tactics and tools that you can use to simply just get somebody to take action or to, make a quick decision, that may or may not get a sale. But if you really want to build loyalty and trust and credibility and connection that has them continuing to come back, continuing to support your brand because there's a relationship there. Story is really a powerful way to introduce that idea and to build on it. So it's not just identifying and connecting to any person or any people, but your people, the individuals who see and understand the world in the same way that you do. And one thing that it's important to think about is the idea of DNA, and that's desires, needs, and aspirations. So what is my audience's DNA? What's the DNA of my people? What are the things that, as I'm telling my story, that they want, that they need, that they desire? How can I weave that through the narrative of my brand story to get those people to buy in and really connect with what I'm doing and see themselves in my story as well? It's all about them and not that much about you. It's about you, but it's really about you and how they can follow along with your story and see themselves in it. Some of the best ways to tell brand stories, I think most of us know these things: videos, obviously, social media, website, package or product. If you have a product, I can remember going in stores and not really being interested in a product to buy, but somehow looking at the package and reading the story of how the product came to be, and really feeling, a deeper connection to the company or to the product itself. Because I read this interesting story, or hearing speakers talk about their product, and then going in the store to see it on the shelves and realizing that, okay, this is the product that they talked about. How they started making it in their kitchen or building it in their garage, and now it's on the shelf. It's in my home. It's something that I use and I love. So all those things help us feel connected. But if you could think of other ways, modern methods that we use to tell great brand stories, or things that you've seen out there, feel free to drop that in the chat right now. And so, we'll sort of move on here to talk about why brand stories are important and valuable. But thinking about all the things that we've shared so far, why are brand stories not just important and valuable, but also powerful and profitable? And that's really important. They're powerful, but they're also profitable, as we've learned. Looking back at those people that Gbenga told us about, it's laughable that they would just take the money and not leverage the power of their stories, knowing what we know now. And the reality is that possibility is available for any of us, for any of our businesses, if we lean into this innate power and universality of brand stories. So why do brand stories work? Several reasons: neurological, emotional, psychological. It's something that we like to participate in innately. It's sort of wired into the way we are. And there's a lot of brain science here that I'm not going to get into, because I'm not a neurologist or a brain scientist or anything. But both as the reciter or the teller and the receiver, or the person listening to the story, we love storytelling. And I'm sure we could think about times when we were a kid, hearing great stories and how we were drawn in. And the same thing happens today on a more sophisticated level. But there are people that study this. This is what they do, and they've learned to perfect the idea of story in a business sense. So I found this graphic, which I can happily share. It's from an organization called Antics at Play, but this sort of shows a little bit of how storytelling affects the brain. There's chemical things happening in different parts of the brain. You can see that all parts of the brain are sort of stimulated by the process of storytelling. Neural coupling is that idea that you are sort of in the story with the person that's telling it. There's dopamine. It's a chemical that allows you to be able to remember, the details of stories and things like that. This is a great area of study, and neuromarketing is sort of what it's called. But there's been lots of advances here. I did a luncheon lab last year where I brought on someone who studies the brain, and we sort of talked about some of the things that are happening. You can find that on our YouTube channel. But storytelling affects your brain. This has been happening since you were young, before you knew it, before these things were really studied. Now we have, scientific evidence that sort of shows that you like stories, but now we know why, and sort of can monitor and understand what's happening in the brain as stories are being told, or as we're telling stories. So the factors working against you, really quickly, we want to tell stories. They're meaningful and memorable and powerful for people, for our audience, but there's factors working against us if we're honest, thinking about the marketplace today. There's a ton of marketing messaging that's out there, thousands of brand marketing messaging that we're getting every single day. So there's just a lot of competition. And so people are, moving from event to event, from place to place really quickly. And it's hard to get our story to stick just because there's so much out there. There's abundance of technology and channels for brand communication. So that there's, you can feel like you've got to be everywhere at once. And my advice there is to be where your customers are and tell them stories in ways that your research shows that they appreciate and understand. Give it to them in a way that they can digest and really comprehend. Short attention spans. Studies have shown that the attention span is going down over time as we are sort of bombarded with more and more sensory overload. So that's something that has to be factored in as well. People like 1-minute videos, not necessarily 10-minute videos. And so think about the format that your story is coming in order to increase its effectiveness and as far as staying in the mind of your customer. People are more and more familiar with different marketing tactics. And so sometimes people are, a little bit hesitant to fully give themselves to a story because they don't want to feel like they're being marketed to or sold to. And so telling it in a way that is like a friend talking to another friend is a winning strategy at times, because people don't want to be talked down to. They don't want to be preached to, those types of things. They want to feel like if they're going to listen to a brand story, it doesn't feel like, okay, well, there's going to come with a sales pitch at the end or anything like that. So that's something to consider as well. And then just in general, a lack of trust that people have in institutions and other people, and things like that, that it's just something that should be considered as you think about telling your story. All these things are factors that are working against you. However, there are a number of factors that are working for you. As we mentioned, the natural human inclination towards storytelling. We love stories, and whether they are visual or verbal, this is something that people are always going to gravitate toward because that's how we're made. People have more access to more information, and so they know that great stories are out there and people are looking for them. And social media sort of shows us that people are looking for inspirational content. They're looking for things that they resonate with. They're looking for things that they can believe in and get behind. And so your story is a way to showcase that for those people out there that are looking to find that type of content. And I think stories create conversations. It's the ability for people to watch a video and then comment on it, and then reach out to the person that created it and be able to share, this resonated with me because I lived the same experience. And so that opportunity is powerful, and through tools like social media, it wasn't always there for people to, not only just, you know, sit and watch something compelling, but also be able to share and chime in and talk about how it relates to their experience. And so we can do that on a much greater scale now, which is something that I think people like, and helps to encourage us to continue to come up with great stories. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gbenga. He's going to walk us through framework for helping us to craft our own brand stories. And I'm really excited about this portion. So thank you guys for your attention. And I will stop sharing. And Gbenga, you can now take it away.
Great. Okay, so pretty much, thank you so much, Reggie, for that and showing us the facets of storytelling. So, so pretty much this idea that everyone has a story, and if that were true, every business also should have a story, and every nonprofit should have a story. And by this definition, we're looking at what really sets your ultimate differentiator. What sets you apart from your competition is your story. So Reggie gives us, the science of how a story connects, but it's this idea that through storytelling, we are able to establish differentiation in the marketplace, and we're able to set our brand apart from the competition. At this stage, the origins of our story come from our founder's story, our personal story for the most part. And as you've seen the examples that I've shared, that personal experience with you can be elevated to become this inclusive, involving narrative that is more cohesive. As a startup, as an entrepreneur, as a fundraiser, as a thought leader, ultimately people will buy into you before they buy what you're selling. Will buy your stories, will try to invest in you, and your ability to accelerate that process. You have the opportunity with your story. So the thought leaders that I showed, again, it comes down to this idea of story. And what I wanted to do at this point is to elevate brand story to signature story. So what is that ultimate differentiator story that you all have that kind of sets us apart? And that is our brand signature story. The definition of a brand signature story is an intriguing, authentic, evolving narrative with a strategic message that helps to clarify and enhance the brand. So I really want to echo this idea that it has to be intriguing, it has to be authentic, and it has to be involving. It has to be intriguing because every opportunity you have to tell a story is a co-creation opportunity. It's an opportunity that you're offering your audience to do business with you, to co-create with you. And in making that first impression sticks, that you have what is called an intriguing introduction. It has to be authentic because it speaks to the unique attributes and qualities that only you have. This idea that no one else in the world has your story. And in my experience with working with leaders, it's very easy for us to discount our personal story and think that it's not as important or intriguing or powerful enough. When we do that, we miss the opportunity for you to be involving. Because when our story becomes involving, that is when we can activate communities, we can activate demographics, we can expand or activate market shares, and we can do business with the story. And also this idea that your brand story, it's a business asset. We know that a business asset is very real, and your story can be elevated to become a brand asset, to become an asset for the business that you monetize. I kind of talk about this with an analogy of real estate, that if you look at real estate, you can either own real estate or you can rent real estate. When you own real estate, you garner what is called home equity. Your brand story is that equity that you have in your business that you can monetize. So the kind of the framework that I've created for creating brand stories is a combination of your defining moments, and a story theme, the combination of this equals your signature story. So if you look at the president, what happened at Walter Reed, and if you look at the Oprah in Baltimore, if you look at Robert Kiyosaki in Hawaii, so all of this has certain specific moments in their life's journey. So when you look at your brand story, you want to look at what is your own moment. What are those pivotal moments? The second idea is this theme, and that theme is the more future-oriented aspirational component of it. So if you look at the journey of Robert Kiyosaki, breaking into this realm of financial education or financial literacy space, at that point, it could be a goal that he wants to accomplish, but he has a moment, and that theme of financial education or money or family becomes the dominant theme of that story. And that is what really helped him to get a niche with his business and use that story as the ultimate differentiator. So the same applies to every sector that we go into. You want to think, what about the theme of the story and the moment of the story? It's a very simple framework. With this, you would have a signature story. So what I want to do is to show us a few examples, and I want you to follow with me as I show this example. Do we have anyone from the nonprofit space who work with nonprofit? Can you indicate in the chat box if you do business or kind of come from nonprofit or represent a nonprofit organization? Okay. So I want to start with, we know that nonprofits kind of do fundraising, do marketing, do newsletter and campaigning they do, and they kind of use storytelling very well. So I want to start with a nonprofit called Susan G. Komen, and I think it could be a very insightful case study of how a nonprofit is able to utilize story to really do well profitably. So Susan G. Komen, it's one of the market leader when it comes to nonprofits in general, but when it comes to breast cancer, I think they kind of set themselves apart, and they use storytelling exceptionally well. And that story comes from a pivotal moment that happens to the founder. So if you read on the screen, it says in 1980, dancing Gbenga promised her dying sister Suzanne that she would do everything within her power to end breast cancer forever. In 1982, that promise became Susan G. Komen. All they had was $200 and potential names or shoebox of names. And to date, that organization has grown to become a $2 billion nonprofit. And they started with $200. But that kind of the story that is kind of prepared in their fundraising comes from a personal story of the founders. And it wasn't as too much of a positive story. But in storytelling, it's not so much what has happened, but what do you do with that experience of what has happened? How do you tell that story? So this is a nonprofit that is really a market leader, and they've been able to utilize this particular story in all their messaging. And when I do live workshops and I tell this story in a live event, that if you have any member that have kind of battled cancer, I see most hand goes up, but very few of us have been able to take that particular moment and make it a compelling narrative, a strategic narrative that can actually become a fundraising tool for a nonprofit that can actually do more good in the world. So if you look at this story and you want to kind of assign a theme to this story, I have some examples on the screen. What theme are you going to assign to this story? You can use the chat box to chat your answer. Okay, and there is no wrong answer. It's just how this story is landing for you. So we have one so for diversity. Okay, great. Anyone else? freedom. Okay, great.
Gbenga, I have a question. Is there typically one answer, or if you see a combination of things, is that appropriate, or is it going to be one overriding theme?
One overriding thing, but it could be anyone. And there's no wrong thing. It's just the way it lands for you. It's just the way it lands for you. Okay, great. So that story, that's a personal story, is elevated to an organizational brand story. And we see the impact of that in fundraising. So let's look at another story. So we all love Starbucks. It's part of our money morning ritual or routine. So let's look at how that story kind of evolved out to become elevated to a brand story. So the highlighted paragraph, the co-founder Howard Schultz traveled to Italy and was captivated by the Italian coffee bars and the romance of the coffee experience. And he had the vision to bring that coffee house tradition back to the United States to be a place of conversation and sense of community, a thought place of working home. And if you look at the paragraph today, there are over 21,000 stores in 65 countries, and Starbucks is the ultimate market leader. And prior to this time, Starbucks was not a place you'd go to. They sell coffee beans that you would make yourself. They don't have coffees in paper cup that we have. So it was this realization on a marketing trip, on a business trip representing the organization, that was able to pivot the organization. And that story was very instrumental to become the market leader they had today. And he told the story on Oprah Super Sunday that when he had that coffee in Italy, that he had this visceral experience and he literally saw what the future of Starbucks is. And that story was what he used to be able to raise capital to buy Starbucks from the initial owners because they weren't going with the vision, and to make Starbucks what we know today. If you were to assign a theme to that story, what theme would you assign to the Starbucks story? Okay, seems to be calling about discovery. So let's look at another story. Warby Parker eyewear. I actually have one on me right now. So let's look at a story, the brand story of this. Every idea starts with a problem. Ours was simple. Glasses are too expensive. And we were student when one of us lost his glasses on a backpacking trip. The cost of replacing them was so high that he spent the rest of the semester without them. The rest of us had the similar experiences, but we were amazed how it was hard to get affordable great frames. What are the options? As a result, they came up with this organization that is really disrupting the eyewear industry. Again, it was a personal experience with these co-founders that they had on this trip. It was a moment they had, and that was able to be elevated to a brand story for an organization that prepared them to this current status they have within that industry. Let's try once again to put a theme to the story. For Warby Parker. And I'm sorry I'm going so fast. I'm trying to get some checking the time over time. I'm trying to kind of stay with time. And one thing I should also say is it is fine if you have different themes with the story, and that actually might be a good thing, because what is going to happen is that when you tell your story, the themes becomes demographic, and it speaks to the psychographics and the demographic of your audience. And even multiple themes sometimes even expands your market share. Because as Reggie said, ultimately people listen to your story with the lens of their own story. So you're actually making it more inclusive, and you're actually opening up your market share. And the ultimate goal of an entrepreneur or nonprofit is to expand your market share, is to expand your mind share. So the themes allow you to really activate those communities. Okay, so I can see how the framework is a very simple framework. You think about your defining moment, you think about your story theme, and then a signature brand story is born. And that could be for an individual, it could be for a business, and it could be for a nonprofit. So let's try to personalize this exercise right now. So I want to ask you, what is your defining moment? I'm going to put some questions on the screen. In the instead of time, if you look at the one that kind of speaks to you personally, just identify the number. You don't have to tell us the whole story. Identify the number and put the number in the chat box. So here are some examples of what defining moments kind of originates from. So we have how you found your purpose, voice, or calling. If that is yours, put one on in the chat box. An event that completely changed your life. That's number 2. How you started your business. The moment of crisis that you overcame. When you decided to go after your dreams. When you form your identity. And this identity could be cultural identity. It could be gender identity. It could be professional identity. It could be spiritual identity. Whatever identity that is for you, how you formed it. I know for a lot of people, breaking into corporate world and stepping into entrepreneurship is a really morphing of identity, professional identity for them. A moment of inspiration, healing, or breakthrough. Okay, great. So glad I'm seeing all these numbers. So what I want you to do next is now think about that story coming to mind. What is the dominant theme? If you were to kind of an overarching theme you want to assign to that story. So I'm going to give an example, options to choose from. So let's go back to this list of themes again. Again, these themes here are not exhaustive. I've seen this recurring themes. This is why I have this. But if you were to choose one word to just kind of define that story you just told, that number represent for your story, what theme are you going to assign to that story? Okay, great. So, okay, excellent. So I see loss, I see love. So again, just I said discovery, I said adversity. Again, it's not so much what happened, but how you tell that story. And that was my intentions for showing you a tragic story that was transformed to something that is doing good in the world. A crisis story, a discovery story. If I have more time, I'll show you a whole lot more stories. But it's not so much of that, but really, how do you asset frame that narrative? How do you craft that narrative in such a way that is involving, that is authentic, and in such a way that is intriguing? Once you have that, you have a brand signature story. Whether you're raising capital, whether you are starting a business, whether you are doing fundraising, whether you're selling your book as a personal brand, that becomes your own brand story. So with what we have, can I have that bold volunteer who want to step to the microphone and just kind of give us in a very concise version of what their own moment was, what the thing is, just kind of tell their story if anyone wants to do that for us. And it could be how this kind of frameworks have helped you to just kind of have the beginnings of crafting your story, whether for your business, for your organization, or for yourself. Come on, Emily, let's do it.
All right. So, so my story is centered around, I think the theme is loss. And it's because I have autoimmune disorders, and one of which is vitiligo. So I literally am losing and have lost pigmentation. And it has compelled me to use my skills and my talents and my expertise to support other people with autoimmune disorders and other complex medical conditions, figure out what's going on in their body to bring balance back to the body using food as medicine and other lifestyle interventions.
So Emily, can you take us, like, at what point did you, that moment where either you decided to be an advocate for this or you decided to kind of make peace with this? What was that moment when that crystallized for you?
It didn't come until much later, a few years after I started developing this condition. But the moment was when I was spending a lot of money going to different doctors, different providers, and spending a lot of money trying different diets, spending a lot of time and energy doing that. So it's hard to pinpoint right now exactly when that moment was, because I think it happened over a series of instances.
Okay. And thank you so much, Emily, for sharing that story. My follow-up question would be like, so we're talking about this idea that it's kind of forward-looking, is this goal. So are you kind of using that story for like speaking, nonprofit? What's kind of how are you kind of using that story?
I just decided that I want to utilize social media more, and build my platform and build my brand utilizing social media, but also in public speaking opportunities. So that's how I'm using it and how I want to incorporate it more into my story and why I do what I do.
Great, great. Thank you. So hopefully, today's sessions gives you more tools for you to further craft it and frame it. One thing I would say is if you haven't yet, record that story, write a text of it, you're in great hands with Reggie in terms of distribution of that story. And the more you do that, it becomes this tool that activate other communities and saying, I have my own, thank you for stepping up. And that ultimately creates this identity of a thought leader, because it's thought leadership, because you gave yourself this mental transition that I want to be the face, I want to do something about it, and I want to use my story to just kind of uplift more people in this direction. And if the now goal becomes to raise money, to form partnerships, to build social media, then the story becomes the tool for doing that.
Thank you for that advice. And this has been great. I've learned a lot. So thank you for doing this.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily, for participating in this.
My pleasure.
I think I may be able to have one more. Anyone else want to go real quick and tell us 1 minute or 30 seconds their story and theme? If you're hesitating, I'm just going to say, go for it. Yes, you can.
I don't know if we're going to have any other volunteers, but thank you for Emily for stepping out there. But yeah, hopefully everybody got some tools that they can use to start to craft their own brand story. This was great. So thank you so much.
Awesome. So over to you, Reggie.
All right. Well, that's our program for today. Gbenga, do you mind putting your information in the chat just in case people want to have a follow-up conversation with you, or want to dive more deeply into your offerings as far as storytelling?
Absolutely. So my social media and website, how to connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. My website is gbenga.org. Please feel free to reach out. And in my previous introduction, I do have a book on Amazon. It's called Borderless Voice. And I have a documentary also on Amazon Prime as well. It's called Good to Great Stories. It features on Washington, D.C. entrepreneurs. If you're ever feeling like going back to the university on entrepreneurship, a quick advertisement for my course at UDC in fall. Please go to the UDC website or let me know as well. So thank you so much, Reggie, for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you. And really quick, I want you to explain to everyone the story behind your name.
Oh, thank you so much. Great question. So my name is it's a Nigerian name that means elevate, and that name has kind of become the inspiration for my life's purpose, which is elevating leaders. I'm in the coaching business as well. So my interaction with storytelling, my interaction with education, my interaction with social enterprise, I'm always coming from a place of purpose. And that purpose is to kind of elevate my audience, my community. And I think I've been blessed given this name that constantly reminds me of my life's purpose. So thank you so much for the question, Reggie.
Sure, sure. So there's power in what we name stuff, what we call things. So I definitely thought that was valuable and just something for us to think about as we're all doing our own enterprises and nonprofits and things like that. So we're at time. Thank you everyone for attending. It's been a blast, and I hope you've learned something that will help you put your own brand story together. Gbenga, are you able to share your slides or notes or something like that for folks they're asking?
Yes, so what I can quickly do is to go back, and if you want to take a screenshot of this framework, it's a very, very simple framework. Please feel free to take a picture of it. And it's also in terms of the questions for the defining moments. These are also, you can also take a picture of that as well, or just a screenshot of those as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again, everyone. This has been a great way to end the week. And I wish you all blessings and prosperity in your various ventures. Thank you. Have a great weekend.